Alright, so in this video I'm going to do a quick rundown of what's supposed to happen in your assignment, what you're supposed to do. So the first thing that you're supposed to do is that you remember that in your previous assignment we were told to draw an architectural plan, right, of a house. Group A had its own dimensions and Group B had its own dimensions. So specifically I'll be talking about the dimensions for Group A because that's what I've been working with. But you can apply the same principles that will be applied also for Group B. It's just one and the same thing, basically. So the first thing that you're supposed to do is that you're supposed to go to your ground floor plan. You remember the ground floor plan that you had done earlier on for your architectural work. That's the same plan that you're supposed to use for this work. So, for example, when you get your ground floor plan, right, it's going to have things like windows, doors, furniture inside. It's also going to have windows, doors, and furniture. So what you're going to do basically, you're just going to switch off all the windows, the doors, and the furniture. Then after you've switched those off, you're going to have broken segments where the doors and the windows were. Just connect those lines so that you can come up with something that looks like this. Don't mind these blue things. I'll explain them later. But now, when you switch off all your doors, all your windows, then you reconnect all those broken lines, and you switch off all the furniture. You're going to have something like this. So now, when you get something like this, so like I said, don't mind the blue dots. So like when you switch off all that, you're going to have this, right? Now, the distance from this line to this line, we were using the wall thickness, right? So for example, in my case, I was using a wall thickness of what? 150. That's the point between this line and this line. Now, for this assignment, we were told to say that the fundamental thing that you're supposed to start with first was the grid lines, right? Now, in order for you to create a grid line, so for example here, I'm going to delete this. I can just show you how to create a grid line. You are going to get your line 2. You draw a straight line from here, from one end of the corner to one end of the corner. Then when you're done with that, you're going again to get another line to draw a line that goes up like this. After you've done this, this line that goes up, this is essentially your midpoint, right? Yeah. So now you are going to create a layer that you're going to call grid line or grid layout, however you're going to name it. Then when you select that layer, remember that your grids have to have a broken line type of situation. So for example, I can use these broken lines that are here. Then I'll just create a line. Now these lines have to be uniform throughout. So for example, I'll create a line that goes up by 4,000 meters by 4 meters, which is just 4,000 millimeters. Enter. That's like this. Then I'll come again over here to another corner. Do the same thing that I'm from doing. I'll do line. I get this corner. I bring it all the way up to somewhere here. Then grab the mid. So let me just trim out this end here. Grab the midpoint of this line here, which is here. Then I'm going to drag it up like so by a distance of what? 4,000 millimeters. So why am I using the 4,000? Because I want all these lines to have a what? Same height. Now, in order for them to run through all the way up to the bottom, you just need to drag this line that you had done and bring it down to the bottom here. Now, your walls were accurately done. You realize to say that this line will be passing through the midpoint of all the points that all the walls that you're going to have. So it's the same thing that you're going to do on the left hand side, whereby I can delete this thing here. Like I said, the blue things, don't mind them for now. Then I do line, get this line again, get the midpoint, drag it outside. I'll do 4,000 again, just like so. Then I'll extend this and bring it all the way up to somewhere here. What you're going to realize is that it's passing through the midpoint of all my walls. This is what you're supposed to do. Now, when you do that for all the points, the critical points that are in your building, you're going to have something that looks a little bit like this. So this is going to be essentially your grid layout. Something that looks like this. Don't mind these ones inside, I'll explain them later. So it's going to look something like this. Now, coming to these blue things that I have put here is what these are. When you draw your grid line that passes through going in this direction and another grid line passing through this direction here, at the point where they meet at a corner or at a junction, there's going to be a midpoint, right? That midpoint, that's where you'll be placing your what? Your columns. Now, these columns, essentially what they are actually going to be, they're going to have a thickness of your wall thickness. This is when you're showing them like on a ground floor plan or on a first floor plan. They're going to have the thickness of your wall. So for example, here you're going to create a cube. So let me just do a quick demonstration of that cube on this earlier thing that I was giving a demonstration on. So you're going to create a cube that is going to be 150 by 150. That's if your wall thickness is 150 by 150. But if your wall thickness is 200, you're going to create a cube that is 200 by 200. So I'm going to do 150 by 150 in my case. So this thing that I've created, when I try to move it and I touch the edges of it, a geometry center will appear. So we will get this geometry center, place it, let me look for an ideal spot. So let me just try to create a center for this. Let me just trim out this part so that I can actually have a midpoint. So here it is. Let me just copy this, touch the edge, a geometry center appears. Then this line that I'm from doing, it will have a center. When I press it on the midpoint, what you're going to realize that this square that I've created fits perfectly within my wall. Why? Because it's a 150 by 150. This side it fits perfectly, this side perfectly, this like this perfect. So essentially here, like I said, what you're trying to do is that you're just trying to show where your columns are located on your ground floor and your first floor and your foundation plan. So this is what is expected of you to do. So that when you do all those, let me go back to my ground floor. It will look like this. So I have these blue things all over. Now you've seen where this line and this line meet at the center. This is where I have my column showing, just like here, like everywhere. So that's basically it on the grid lines and the foundation. So when you do your grids for this, you can actually just copy them on their own and they'll look something like this. Those are the grids that you're supposed to do. Then apart from doing your ground floor, I have indicated these things here, these little arrows, I might say. One is going in this direction, the other one is pointing like this, just like this. You are putting them like this because they're showing the distribution of what? Steel. So these need to be on your ground floor and on your first floor. So like on my ground floor, I have them. On my first floor, I also have them. Now, for your first floor, remember that for some of you, you're going to have a different type of structure for your house. Make sure that you do a separate grid line for it as well. So for my case, the grid line, the structure of my first floor and my ground floor, they're actually the same. So my grid lines will basically be the same. Then, apart from that, you're supposed to do your foundation plan. Now, the foundation plan, what you're going to do is that you're going to create this little square that I have here. Now, this square is going to be 1,500 by 1,500. Why? Because these were dimensions that were already provided for us. These show the part foundation. Then, when you create that square, so for example, let me just pick a quick example here. I'll create a square that is 1,500. 1,500, enter. I'll have something like this. Then you can actually decide to copy this. That is when you have already done your plans. I'll grab this center. Now remember that this box that I created, when I touch it on the edges, a geometry center will appear. All I have to do is just place that column on the geometry center and I would have created a part foundation. That's how you're going to do for everything that is on your workspace area. On all the columns at the midpoint, you attach a part, and it will look something like this. That is after attaching all the parts, it will look something like this. So basically, that's your foundation plan. Yeah. Next up, what we're going to have is the actual part footing, how it's going to look like. So you are actually going to have your plan view, but that plan view, it will contain how the rebars are actually being distributed. So now, for me, these rebars here that we were using, these were Y12, right? Now, you need to indicate a number. So this is more like a code for that particular rebar that you're using, like the way this I was teaching it in class. So, next up, what this really means is that the 11 here in front means that I'm going to have 11 rebars of this type. The Y12 means that the diameter or the high yield strength is Y12 and it has got a diameter of 12. Then this is the bar mark here, this is the spacing. So essentially what you're going to do is that you're going to run a line. First of all, this line here, you're going to offset it by 200. This line, which is this side, you're going to offset it by 200. Then all these lines again, you're going to offset them by 50, 50, 50. This is if you're in group A, because we were told to say that the concrete cover is what? 50. Now, when I offset this line, let me just do a quick offset of 50. Enter. When I offset line here by 50, what you realize is that it touches this point of my rebar here. So this is a rebar. So now, when I offset by 50, it will only touch this part here. This shows the concrete cover. Again, when I offset on this side to this side, it will actually just touch at this edge. This shows my what? My concrete cover. Then, the reason why you are offsetting in the first place by 200 is, look at this. When I offset by 200, bring it in, it will touch this line here. This line. Why? Because this is where all the rebars are starting. Because why am I offsetting by 200 is because the spacing between the bars is 150, the concrete cover is 50. So when I do the concrete cover of 50, I need to leave a spacing of 150. This is what's going on here. So this is basically what you're supposed to do. Then when you're done with drawing this, now the rebars again, I should make mention to say, when you draw a line that is straight, remember that this side you're also supposed to have a what? A concrete cover of 50. So let me just do another offset just for clarity's sake to say this side I'm going to have a 50. Now when I do a 50, you've seen this is where the bar is ending. So as a result, now the main focus point is that your rebar should not just be one straight line. You actually need to show its diameter. So since this is a Y12, you are going to offset the line that you're going to draw from this end of the 50 to the other end of the 50. That is going to be offset by a distance of what? 12. When you offset it by a distance of 12, it's going to look something like this. Same with this one by a distance of 12. Then you are going to include these points here and include arrows to them like this. Like this. This shows that the rebars are being distributed, and you're going to do it for this same side as well. Then at the middle of all these parts, you're going to put your column which had 300 by 300. Now, here's where you actually show the 300 by 300. Remember what I told you to say that in the plan, you're actually going to do it the way it was for your wall thickness. For example, mine was 150, right? But when you're showing it in this scenario, what's going to happen is that it's going to be a 300 by 300. That's how you're supposed to do it. Then, when you do this, you're supposed to section it. For example, I've included my section that it will be on AA, looking in this direction. So, when I section AA, I'm going to have something that looks like this. So, in order for you to get this, you're supposed to offset the bottom line here by a 50 going up, and you're going to get this line, which is here. Let me just highlight it. This line here. Let me just do this. Yeah. You're going to get this line here at the bottom. Now, we are using Y8 bars for this. So as a result, you're also going to Y12, sorry. You're going to offset this by a 12. Then, after offsetting this by a 12, you are now going to put these tiny little balls like this at a distance of 150. So you're going to put this one at a distance of 150, this one at a distance of 150, just like this, until you put 10 of them on this bottom rebar, this one here. Now, on top of these two balls, you need to put, you need to offset from here, going all the way up to the top. That's if you want to use offset, for example. You're going to need to offset by a distance of what? 12, because these balls are also going to be, are going to have a diameter of 12. Now, your line needs to touch, for this one, it needs to touch exactly on top of these rounded balls that you've created. Then, you offset this line again, this line, you offset it coming up to a distance of what? 12 again. That's how you get it. Then you're supposed to go and check on your bar bending schedule to say what radius are you being given for that particular bar. Now for this one, the radius should have been, I think that was 36. So this radius here is 36. You're going to use fillet to draw these bars that are going up. Now apart from that, now you're going now to have these ones that are at the bottom here. Now these ones that are at the bottom, they are actually Y8 bars. So from this line, you're going to offset going to this line by a distance of what? 12, or of 8, sorry, because these ones are links or ties that are going to have a distance of 8 or a diameter of 8. Then, when you're done with that, you are simply going to fillet this end and this end by a radius of 24, because why 8 bars have got a radius of 20, have got a radius of 24. So you're going to curve it out by a radius of 24. Then you're going to create a line that starts from here and ends anywhere, somewhere here, or even at the midpoint. So it's all up to you. Then you're going to offset that line again. So for example, me, I had this line here. I would offset it by 12. Then I'm going to have a radius of 24, 24. Just like this, in order for me now to create this tag. Then I'm going to put them at a spacing of what? 100 going up. Then I'm going to show these points that actually tell me to say I have more of the bars. Then I'm even going to put the codes like I have here. Next up is the section view. So the section view, it depends with what kind of a shape of these ties that you want to go with. So for example, me, I went with the one that is on code 79, it should be. Yeah, so you're going to have these ones here that are stemming out. So these round ones, the 4 of them, they're going to be Y12. So which means the diameter of this circle is going to be 12. These ones here, the second ones, this one, it's actually this bar that is coming out of this. Then these ones that are rounded, this one, it's the ties or the stirrups. Yeah, so that's it on the part foundation. Next up, you're going to have your ground beam. So your ground beam is actually going to be connected to your part foundation. Now remember that in the assignment, it was taught to say that the distance between your ground beam and your part foundation is 1000. So you're going to have your 1000 here. Oh, and I should make mention to say that don't forget to include your kicker height here of 75. Then next up, what you're going to have is, back to this, you're going to have your your part here. Then now the beam is going to be connected to the part. So you just need to show a section of that beam that is being connected to the part, and the section will look like this. Now whatever the distance in this direction is 450, this direction 300. Then you include those like you had done that on your beam that was connected to the part. Just like this. You do these are going to be Y16, so the diameter is going to be 16. Just like that. Then next up, it's the main beam. The main beam, you're just going to draw a beam that is going to have 4000 millimeters. Then when you section it, you need now to show these ties and these rods that are actually going in this direction. The same procedure you had done on the foundation, it's the same procedure that you're going to do in this one, but in a vertical, in a horizontal sense, sorry. So they're going to run in this direction, then you're going to have your ties tied to them, just like this. So next up now will be the section, will be the column, sorry. So the column, you're actually going to give it a distance of 3000 millimeters, just like this. This is a plan view. Then the section, it will be the same thing you're going to do here that you had done here on this part here. You're going to do it again on this side. Now these ones should be Y12, then these are Y8. Now you just start tying them around, just like I have explained on the pad. Yeah. Then on the stairs, you're supposed to find how many number of stairs are going to be needed for a particular house. So if it's a 3-meter house, you're actually going to have a staircase that is more like mine. Whereas you're going to have close to about, should be 18 risers, these steps that you actually step on. Now, the most fundamental thing is knowing how to draw this reinforcement and these reinforcements here. So this reinforcement is just going to run from the bottom here, which is going to be a Y12 reinforcement. So this diameter from here to this line, which is 12, it's just going to run through. It runs through all the way up to this landing. Again, you run it through. Then you start adding these circles, these ones here, at a distance of 150. So the easiest way to do these circles is, let me just delete these circles that I have on me right now. You're just going to, after you've created your rebar along the axis of your stairs, you're just going to go to your line 2, then you select a point, you draw a straight line. Then once you're done with that, you go to your circle, choose the circle which says turn radius. Then select this line and select this line. Then enter a radius. Those should have been 8. If I'm not mistaken, the radius should have been, the diameter is 8, so the radius is going to be 4. You enter it like that. Then you can delete this line that you had created. You select the circle here. Go on array. You try to create an array. So let me just look for the option for the array. Okay, you can just type it in since I can't find it. Let me just type it in. Array. then you're going to select where it's written path. Then it will say select path curve. So on the select path curve, you're just going to select this line here. Then here, where it's written between here, on this part, you're just going to put in 150 because that's your distance. Then enter. So your circles would have been at a distance of 150 throughout. So you do the same, you create a circle here at the starting point, then you do an array, just like we have done at the bottom here. That's how you do it. Then the plan view of the stairs, you'll be just showing the number of steps that people or traders that people are going to be stepping on. That's it. Next up, you're going to have your slab. So for your slab, you're actually going to do a concrete cover of 40. That 40 will be starting from the exterior line, not from the interior line, but this exterior line, you do your 50. Then you're going to have bars that are running all the way. Even this side, you do your concrete cover of 50. Then the bars end where 50 is ending, which is here. Then you also do the same thing this side. You're going to have a 50 here. Then these are going to run down all the way down up to here, just like this. So basically that's it. The other aspect that you would have to look into would be to connect this beam and this column. So you just get this, you put it on top of this, then you bend the reinforcement, they should look inside. That's it, you would be done with your assignment.